when you connect with somebody in a sci-fi show, it makes you think that your life could be larger than life. Your life could be exciting and wild too. And that was not something that I got as a young trans person. I never saw myself in any of these characters, so I never felt like my life was going to be a grand adventure. Hi, my name is Moxy.
And I'm Verve, and we are a camming couple.
And today we're talking about our top 10 influential pieces of media in the LGBTQ community.
Schitts Creek. For me, it was the first time I had ever seen in media a queer relationship that did not have to go through any turmoil. They just got to love each other. No one was questioning their relationship. No one was questioning their sexuality. They just got to love each other.
Yeah, so often queer characters are reduced to being that's their entire personality or that's their entire shtick for the show. Whereas I feel on Schitts Creek, they were fully realized characters who happen to be that their sexual orientation is a queer one instead of being straight. Just like all the straight characters were just people with fully fledged personalities who happened to be straight. And I think that moving forward, we're going to see more of that because people realize that you can write queer characters in this way. And I think that they definitely made waves in how you could write these characters.
Rocky Horror Picture Show. I absolutely love Rocky Horror Picture Show. This is one of the first cult classics I ever saw growing up. And I feel like it really helped me come into my own as far as playing with gender is concerned. The idea of drag and self-expression and sexuality is very strong in that movie, and that really resonated with me at the time.
Becoming Chaz. So Becoming Chaz is the story of Chaz Bono, Cher's child, who was one of the first openly trans men in popular media that I'm aware of at all. And he so bravely, in a time of turmoil, decided to make a documentary exploring his transition and his story. I just remember that seeing this man be himself was the first little crack in the egg at the back of my mind that made me start to think this is an experience that people have. These are real people, and this is something that somehow connected to me. There was one specific scene where Chaz was talking about how anytime he would create a fantasy for himself when he was playing video games or writing stories or doing any of that, he always personified himself as a man. And that was something I really connected to. And that's not to say that people can't explore gender through media and things like that, but it was something that just started to make me think. It was something that sat there in the back of my mind when I was still really repressed that I, to this day, attribute to why I even started thinking about it at all, why I knew it was being trans was even a concept, was because of this documentary. Ranma One Half. Ranma One Half is an iconic 90s anime in form and fashion. It's, to me, one of the most influential pieces of LGBTQ media from my experiences, because it showed me that gender exploration and gender performance was not something that was unique to Western culture. It was something that was international. It was something that was global. The story of a boy who, when doused with water, has to transform into the body of a girl was something that I fantasized about profusely as a young adult. I so badly wanted the ability to just change on a moment's notice and be able to feel like I'm myself, but then change back when I felt unsafe. And the story of Ranma growing and accepting this feminine side of himself also allowed him to accept the feminine people around him, the women in his life that he really didn't have respect for before that point. And that's something that I can really relate to. I had a lot of internalized misogyny growing up, but this story of somebody who knew internally that there was this feminine part of them slowly made them have more acceptance for all people. And I think that's a story that a lot of trans and non-binary people can relate to.
Same Love by Macklemore and Ryan Lewis featuring Mary Lambert. Same Love was the first time that I heard a song that was talking about queerness within the mainstream sort of radio. I remember hearing it on the radio for the first time and just being like really moved as a young queer person. I think I was 11 or 12 when it came out. I would have loved to see and would continue to love to see more queer artists in the music world. I love seeing what Lil Nas X is doing right now. That's awesome. Mary Lambert is featured in that song, and I believe Mary Lambert is a lesbian, and she sung so beautifully on Same Love. I still think that her feature on that song is beautiful and part of one of my favorite music moments. Orange is the New Black.
Orange is the New Black did some really amazing things for the queer community by bringing sympathy to our stories. I think it still is problematic, and that's something that we should look at, because even though we're supposed to sympathize and care about these characters, all of them are criminals. And while any representation is good, it would be nice to see more media that doesn't portray queer people as being criminal in any way. But that's not to say that we don't have those stories as well. So on the one hand, it's really amazing, but on the other hand, I would love to see that outweighed by more positive views moving forward. Pride. It is the story of solidarity and the strength that brings to the LGBTQ community. It follows a few young gay men and lesbian women in, I believe, Britain at the time, and their pursuit to gain solidarity by helping the miners who were at the time striking against the government. And in return for their solidarity and help with the miners, that year the miners turned out at Pride and they marched. Miners across the entire country marched in solidarity with the queer community and showed that really there's more similar between us than there are differences when you are a minority and when you are shunned from society.
The Danish Girl.
The Danish Girl to me was one of the first times that I saw a full-fledged or full-length feature film about a trans character. So often we are the side characters or token characters, but this was the first time I saw a film in which a trans woman was the main character, and her story of coming out was what the story was all about. I think that there are some issues with it, however, with the fact that the actor who played the main character was a man, and I think that didn't garner the same kind of sympathy off camera as, say, Laverne Cox's representation in Orange is the New Black. I think that The Danish Girl kind of perpetuated this idea that transness is a man in a dress. So while I think it is a beautiful film and Eddie Redmayne did a fantastic job, his acting of it was just playing up being feminine, and was just playing up the fact that a man could act like a woman, and that gender expression was something that could be acted out. There is so much more about this woman than her transness, and I think that was something that was really lost within the film, was that she's a fully realized human being. Not every decision she makes, not everything that she loves is because of her transness. Sense8. Sense8 is a modern sci-fi all about the concept of multiple people around the globe suddenly having their minds merge into one. And within that, the story of all these people's minds merging, one of them is a trans woman. And she is my favorite trans woman in media. Nomi is the best representation of transness that I have ever experienced, because she does struggle with all the things that I struggle with as a trans woman. Her family is not accepting, society is not accepting, the queer community isn't even fully accepting of her. But that also isn't her whole character. She's also an expert hacker. She is fiercely intelligent. She has a beautiful, loving relationship with her girlfriend. And seeing a fully formed, powerful trans woman was so influential to me, and it made me just feel like I could be amazing too. I could do amazing things. And I think that's what sci-fi does for people. I think sci-fi when you connect with somebody in a sci-fi show, it makes you think that your life could be larger than life. Your life could be exciting and wild too. And that was not something that I got as a young trans person. I never saw myself in any of these characters, so I never felt like my life was going to be a grand adventure. But now I finally did, and that was amazing for me. Pose. So Pose is the theatrical retelling of the House of Eleganza during the 80s ballroom scene in North America. So the ballroom scene was so intrinsic to the queer community at the time, and is where things like drag and RuPaul's Drag Race originated from. This TV series really explores the lives of the people within that community. And I think one of the problems that we have at large currently with drag and how popular it's becoming is that people forget that drag and transness were not separable things throughout most of history. They were intrinsically together. So within this show, we have trans women performing drag, we have men dressing up as women, and it was really a place where gender expression was limitless. Anybody could be anything so long as you looked fabulous doing it. And I think the show also does a great job of talking about the HIV/AIDS crisis. It really gets into the fear that people had at that time, and it talks about how we lost an entire generation of leaders, of performers, of working class people. We lost them to this terrible crisis, and that has left the LGBTQ community to struggle without these strong leadership, because the mainstream didn't care about us then. They just said, well, let them die. And that was the truth back then. And this show very, very carefully walks this line of making you care about and love these characters, and then showing the turmoil that they went through because mainstream at that time didn't care. And that to me is just so impactful and so important to know that history and to know where we came from. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you learned a thing or two and have some new things on your watch list. Bye!
Bye!